Let's see here. I'm getting a close up on your family pictures up here behind you. I'm going to zoom out. Let's see here. Our first question is, what were the full names of Granny Rui's grandparents and parents?
Oh, okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Rui's mother was a carper that married a Clifton. Her name was Ethel May Carper Clifton, and K.E. Clifton is Kellen Everett Clifton. They originated out around Gesling, Kentucky, and they were raised in that area, and they married and had 6 children. Wait, no, one. They had one that died very early. But Virgie was the oldest, and then come Bess, and then came Charles Daniel, and then came Edward Eugene, and you see the family names in there: Edward Eugene, Kellen Edward, and then came Clara Jane. Now, Clara Jane was named after Mrs. Wooten. I don't remember that. And Rui was named after, there's a lady named Wheeler. Rui Wheeler was Joe Wheeler's wife, was next door neighbor to the Cliftons when Rui was born, so I think that her name came from Rui Wheeler. But there's not very many Ruis.
Well, when and how did you and Rui Ann Clifton meet?
Well, we lived about, we were born about in the same town I was in the country, outside the town a little bit. She was born in Grayson, and we lived within 3 or 4 blocks of each other while we were young. Now, I went to school with Rui's older sister, and then when I came back from service, I stopped at their house. They had to move because in that day and time you couldn't get materials to work to build. So Mr. Clifton had went north to work in war effort industries, and so he was he lived in Bluffton, and I moved to Bluffton. I lived in them. We laid, I think I paid them so much a week, and we stayed with them for a while till Everett and I moved to Fort Wayne. And then when I came back from service, I stopped in Kendallville at their house on my way home, and she was she was very young then. Well, I was too, really. She was 14. And I was 21 plus. And then eventually they moved down in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And I moved to Yellow Springs, and they moved out to a place called Clifton, Ohio. And I went back to staying with them and paying room and board. And well, there's 3 people. Sandy Ferguson was one that stayed with them, and Herb, and then Herb, of course, went to West Coast to work on the dam, and so I got the job of chauffeuring them girls around. Kay and Jean, Kay and Rui, they call them K and V. I don't know why. I don't know how they come around. But anyway, it's K and V. But anyway, I took K and V. I took K and Rui to the store and to the whatever. And when they had to go to, Rui was a cheerleader, and when she had to go to the ball games, well, she couldn't go unless I went with them as a chaperone. And so as the days grew on, she got better looking, I reckon. And then I began to notice that, well, she's a pretty good looking girl. And then we were married within well, that was in the fall of 46. Fall of 46. And so along about Christmas time or before, we decided to get married. And we picked the date of March 22nd. And we were married in Vanceburg at I can't think of it. Mr. Clifton, K.E.'s brother, was the preacher. And K.E.'s, and the preacher's wife was this, she sang at our wedding. And Eugene Clifton was the best man. So I had Cliftons all around me when I got married.
So, do you remember proposing? Did you have to ask K.E.'s blessing?
Yeah, I did. I asked Ruby, and then she said, "Well, says I'm not very old, and I'm ready to get married." And she said, "And I want to marry, but you got to ask Daddy first." And so I went in. And he's sitting at the kitchen table. One night after supper, he's sitting there doing whatever he did. He's a timekeeper, and he's doing whatever his business was. And so I sit down with him, and I talked to him, and I said, Rui and I would like to get married. And he said, "You would you?" And so I thought, now it's not a very good start here. And I kind of hawed around, and he said, "Well," says, "if it's all right with her mammy, it's all right with me." So then I had to go ask Mammy. And of course, she liked me pretty well. And so she said, "Well, I think she'd do a lot worse. She might ought to wait until she gets older." And I said, "Well, sometimes, but I'd rather not." And she said, "Well, just go ahead and plan your wedding." So we did. We planned our wedding. And we got married down in Vanceburg. And we went to Paris for a honeymoon.
I was going to ask you what stood out the most on your wedding day.
What
was the one thing that stood out the most on your wedding day?
Wedding day. Well, there's a lot of things, I'm telling you. She had a cousin down there who was wilder than a March hare. And we had to go downtown to get something. And, they was going to make ice cream for the wedding or after the wedding. And so this would be her first cousin. It would be Alfred Clifton's daughter. She says, "Come on, I'll show you." And so we took off driving. She drove us around for about maybe 15, 20 minutes. And Vanceburg ain't that big. And finally I said, "You know where you're going?" She says, "No, we ain't got no ice in this town." So we went back and we finally found the ice house. But she was that kind of a crazy girl. But she was Rui's friend all the time, and she called her, and they called each other, and if they call each other, whichever one called the other one on Thanksgiving Day would say, instead of saying hello, they'd say, "Gobble, gobble, gobble," like that. And then on Christmas, it was ho, ho, ho when they talked to each other.
Well, after getting your passports, and did you take a boat or a plane to Paris?
It was Paris, Kentucky.
Oh, Paris, Kentucky. I'm sorry.
Paris, Kentucky.
I didn't know. I thought maybe Paris, France.
Well, I thought I'd add a little bit to it. But we would, we stayed in, I remember because we came back to Lexington to see a movie. And I remember it kept flashing on the screen that Kentucky beat Utah in the NCAA tournament. And I can't remember whether it's finals or...
They won that year, didn't they?
Did they win? I think they did.
46 and 48, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, they kept flashing on the screen about the scores. And another thing is we ate, I saved quarters to go on the honeymoon with. And I had, I believe it's $78 to spend on our honeymoon. Now that was your room and your board, your travel and whatever. So we took K.E.'s car though. He had a relatively new Chevrolet. Can't remember what year, but it was about a couple of years old. And So we went to Paris and we drove over into Lexington, and we ate. Sometimes we eat our lunch at this little hamburger joint up here on. Actually, it was on Main Street then, but you know, nickel hamburgers.
Yeah.
Nickel hamburgers and nickel cokes, and so we splurged, you know, and sometimes got cheeseburgers. But we, you know, that $78 lasted us till we got back.
Well, describe the first home that you all moved into when you came back to Grayson.
First home. Well, we moved when we came back to Grayson after we got married. Well, we came back to Grayson, and we stayed. We lived with a widow woman there on Main Street, right across from the courthouse, and we lived there about a month, and then we stayed while we was building. Dad was building our house, and we moved up to Miss Castle. And we stayed there a month, and that was the 2 months we paid rent. And up until, well, for the next 30 years, 35 years, we never paid no rent. We went down, and Dad had built us a house, but it was just 2 rooms. It was one big room was divided. Eventually, it'd be divided into 4 rooms and bath. But then it was just 2 big rooms, and the sheetrock, some of the sheetrock was on, some wasn't. But we moved in, and sometimes I'd tack on some sheetrock before I'd go to work. And while I was gone, Rudy would permanently nail it. And then when I got back, I'd the next day or whatever, I'd tack up a few more sheets, and she'd get them that night, or she'd get them that day. She'd nail them up. So we lived like that, and wound up with 4 rooms and a path. Well, we got Frank Simmons to come in and put us a bathroom in, and so we was uptown then, you know. And for a refrigerator, well, there's a creek run alongside the house. It still does. I saw it here last week. But it run down along the house, and that's what we used to keep our milk cool. Milk came in glass cartons in. We got them from this guy that Thompson. No, he's from Hitchens. Anyway, he delivered the milk, and we'd take it and we'd set it down in the creek and put the hot top on it, and it kept us cool. We never did. I don't remember having soured milk, and it was cool enough to keep it during the days we could set it in the creek in the shade during the summer months, and that was our refrigerator.
What?
For a stove, we had a something like a radar range, but it was just a big oven, and she could cook toast. She made toast pretty good, but she got so that we finally got a stove. We bought a stove. I reckon maybe sometime after, or right around the first year we lived there, and by that time we had all the sheetrock on and we was working on the base, and we had to put the base around, and she'd nail that, and we eventually got the house livable in. And one time I know that before they had the windows all in, our neighbor lived immediately west of us. They had an old cow, and it came down in the morning and walked up, and he was eating in our yard, and then it stuck its head in the window and went moo, and that's what woke us up that morning. The old cow's head in the window there. So that was an interesting place there. But we lived there for I don't know how many years, 10 or 12 years.
Did you
like
really?
That. Yeah. Because we lived there till all 4 boys was born.
Well,
Jack wasn't born, I don't think.
this is a pretty loaded question, so I don't know if you'll have an easy answer to it or not. You'd make millions off of it. But number 65 there.
Yeah.
What do you believe is the key to a successful marriage?
Well, there's a lot of keys, but there's a lot of locks too. Honesty is one of the best things that a successful marriage has to have, and trust. And if you got those two, then the economical side of it works itself out, and socio whatever works itself out. But the to be honest with each other, and to be honest with the world is really, and that is, I'd say that was be the most important thing that you could remember in a wedding.
Well, how did you find out that you all were expecting your first daughter, Janet?
Janet, yeah, she is a fine gal. See, we lived pretty close. Her mother lived pretty close to us there. She lived where Marcus Suttles lives now, in a little house that Dad and I had built many years before, and they lived there. So she's always up there, and when she went up there one morning after I went to work, and she got sick, and her mother said, "What's the matter with you?" And she told her her stomach was upset or something, and she's gonna take some soda water. What they took then, soda water. Said, "No, you don't take soda water." Said, "We go down and see the doctor." And so that's when she found out that she was pregnant with John. So that was good news.
I would say. Well, let's see. We've already went through why you chose your children's names. As far as your kids and your family, what were some of the things that you all enjoyed doing together as a family when the kids were growing up?
Well, we had some. There's a lot of couples there. Seemed like there's about 6 or 7 couples there, about the same age, and the men had just got out of service, and they had a lot in common sort of stuff, and we played tennis down at behind Pritchard High School. There's a tennis court down there, and we went down there and we'd play tennis and picnic in the summertime, and just have fellowship one with the other. And then in the church we had a certain amount of activities that we enjoyed. And then that's about we worked. We worked 5 tens and a 5, so we didn't have a great deal of time. And then on Saturdays, Marie would go do her shopping, and I stayed at the house most of the time. Well, by that time maybe John had been there, John and Bob, and so we kind of had, you do this thing and I do that thing, and we just kind of worked it out, and it worked.
Well, that gets us to the next question, which I know you got your humble beginnings at the age of 8 in a beauty parlor.
Yeah.
But what was your profession, and how did you come about choosing that?
Well, I don't know. I had worked with Dad. We'd built several houses in Grayson. Dad had, but he wasn't the methodical builder that Mr. Clifton was. Mr. Clifton was get it right, and Dad would say, "It'll do." It don't sound like there's much difference there, but there is a great deal.
I'm more of a that'll do kind of guy, so
Yeah.
I admire the guys who get it right.
Well, now he wouldn't stop until he got it right, and we built a lot of houses in Grayson, and we built. But when we came back from, we was living in Ohio when we got married, and then we came back to Grayson real soon, and we lived. Rui and I lived in behind. Mom and Dad had a restaurant down there close to KCC, and we lived in the back of that for a month, and then we moved out to can't never think of her name, but anyway, and then we moved the next month we moved up to Mr. Castle's. Josie Beckwith was the first lady we lived with. We lived with Josie there for about a month, right alongside of Tyrese. And That's an interesting story too. But we just settled into it. I mean, she was young, but we managed things in the family. Dan had married, and Eugene had married, and so we had 3 young married couples right in there in our family, and then we had all these people coming back from the service and taking up their lives again, and so it was kind of everybody was in on first base seemed like, and there was no we didn't have to fit into any pre-made society. We just made it as we lived.
Well, if you could have chose a different profession, just thinking something fun or something different, something you thought you'd have enjoyed to do. I know you had a budding career as a movie operator.
Yeah.
But looking back on it, is there anything that you would have rather toiled with in construction?
Well, not really. I like construction because you can see what you've done. And, well, now I can look back on it. I could go back over eastern Kentucky and find 50 counties that I've left a memorial there. And it's not that much to anybody else, but, if you've done it and you drive by the courthouse in Sayersville and you see a beautiful marble building there, and you say, well, I had a lot to do with that. I built that job, or a superintendent, or you go by some schools, and we built schools all over eastern Kentucky, and courthouse in Sandy Hook, and just everywhere around we go, whichever way we go, we'd pass something that we'd built. So I think that building was destined to be my forte for
I
sure.
think driving through Lexington when I have people with me, or family, or my grandmother came up for a riding class 6 months ago, my mother's mother. But no matter who it is, I show them Rupp Arena, I show them the 2 courthouses, show them Transylvania University, show them the Downtown Arts Center, the public library. Just jobs that you have done, which it's a little easier for us because we're able to touch a bunch more jobs because we're just doing the lighting.
Yeah.
But I can definitely relate with that, and I know that that's something that's for like Kelly. We were talking the other day. He's worked in 5 decades, and I've worked in I've worked in 3.
Huh.
I'm only 30, but I've worked in 3
3
decades: the 80s, the 90s, and the double aughts. And he worked in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. He's worked in 6 decades.
Yeah, them way the kids worked was
Throwing rocks.
you better get a 40 more minutes of time.
I know. Do I have to get a whole new tape for that?
Because that was interesting. Well, it was interesting as much as the boys was with me, and I want to think that they picked up on the way that I treated subcontractors and the men that worked for me, and the state and then the owners that I worked for, and I think they could see the way of working that's best, which is do the straight and narrow thing. Do it what it's supposed to be. And if you do it right the first time, you don't have to do it again. And so they've got into it. And sometimes I think that the boys have got into a perfection-like thing where they carried a lot further than what I did. But I knew that every job I did had to stand inspection momentarily, and then had to stand inspection of time. And I've got buildings that's 45 and 50 years old that I've built still standing.
Well, on that subject, of all the buildings that you built, what would be the one building that you would consider the greatest accomplishment of your, contracting days? I mean, everything you built, it could be more than one, but what are the ones that really stand out as the crown jewels?
Well, we did a prettiest thing really was that Sayersville courthouse, because I had inch marble that had on the front of it. It was built out of stone with marble insets and granite, and some of that granite came from Finland, and we had to go there because the granite that you get in the United States, they don't cut it under 1.25 inches. It breaks too easy, and we had some 4x8 slabs, and the only place you could get that was Finland. So we ordered it, and we got it in from Finland, and then we set it with our own people. I mean, we didn't hire a bricklayer. Well, we had bricklayers to help us, but we didn't hire a professional mason. We did it ourselves, and and the job looks good, still looks good. And that's one of the better ones, maybe. But really, there's another one that we built out of stone down in Bowling Green, is on 8th and Chestnut for the economic security people. And that was a pretty good looking job. And of course, if you build it out of stone, and it's anyways maintained right, well, it's going to stay a good looking job. And then we did some jobs that were pretty good jobs that we kind of messed up on. Well, we was working for in the contracting business. If you work on somebody's word, that's just like skating on thin ice. You don't know when you're going to pop through. And so we had a situation that kind of cost us about $750,000 down in Fleming County. But we lived through that, and so it didn't hurt us. Although that much money couldn't might help somewhere, but I don't know. We couldn't have got no fatter, so we got fat enough. But the jobs that we did, we had some that's unique. Now, that might be one of them. We built 11 ETV tower buildings.
That was the lock on the board, wasn't it?
That was a job that was had a lot of satisfaction in it, which was a lot of dollars and cents. And it was worked good. And I worked with, we did our own thing. We did our own thinking. A lot of us did our own engineering. And we had a man I had a man there that worked with us that is considered a clown by most people in Grayson, but he had more brains than the engineering department down the state.
Is that Peter Rabbit?
That's Peter Rabbit. There's some Peter Rabbit stories. We'll take the rest of the day.
Well, some of these questions are a little bit open-ended and can be a little much, but you're on Newland TV, so it's okay to let it all hang out here. But this question here says, what is the one thing you would most want people to remember about you?
Nothing, probably. No, I don't know. I live by a certain code, and it works. And I'm in the church, and that works. And in the church is satisfying, and I can witness to that. And in the church, if you raise your children in the church, then they've got a step ahead of the world itself, because they've got the basic ingredients, the honor, it's just they've got something going for them that nobody else has. They've got a spiritual welfare that's down deep, and sometimes it's hardest to come out, but it will come out. That's like you take up a bunch of milk and you shake it, and the cream comes to the top. And the way I see it in my family, they're all cream, and they all come to the top. So all of ours, I don't think we got any of them. They ain't a keeper.
Well, that's really.
Did I overshoot your
No,
question?
that's a good point. I think that you must have studied up on that. I faxed you those answers yesterday. That's a pretty good one. It's true. I think your legacy is. We can't go by this. I'm jumping around now.
Oh,
I got you off kilter on the sheet. But
yeah, you got to stay in line here.
But no, I think that definitely, your legacy is going to be, the good upbringing and the good values and the belief you have.
That's not an original thing. When our first son was born, Mr. Clifton says, now all the time that people always tell you how to raise your children, and the grandparents are the worst. He says, I'll tell you one thing, and that's all. You figure the rest of it out for yourself. He said, when you're raising children, keep them in church. And actually, that's all you can do for them. That's what he said. And the more I thought of that, the more I saw the intelligence in it, really.
Well, we've touched on a lot of these, but a couple of appliances here. When was the first time you remember having a Maytag washer and dryer? Was that about 1928 or?
Oh, no, Lord, no. We had I had an ice machine in 1947. And what you did is they give you a card that had 25, 50, 75, and on the other side was 75 and 100. And you put that up in your window, that how much ice you wanted. And then when the iceman came, he'd walk in and he'd put that amount in your ice box. And that's what you had. You never heard of that one, did
Well, I'm
you?
just thinking there used to be a profession of a guy who carried ice.
Yeah, oh yeah. And we used to, I tell you, when I was a little fellow, I used to follow around in the summertime and try to knob off a piece of it, and then I could go down the street eating ice. And they had a black guy in Grayson that was Callaway. Wasn't Scobe.
We'll call him Scobe Calloway.
Scobe, well, that's good. That's Scobe's brother, really. But anyway, he was the Iceman, and he'd go around and he'd had a horse and buggy, and he'd put his ice. He'd go down to the. They kept it down by the train station, which is on Railroad Street, where it came in on the cars, and that's where he would go down. He'd get his. Then they'd take it to the ice. They had a building that was made out of highly insulated with about 6 inches of sawdust between the outside and the inner side of the building, and it kept it pretty cool, so the ice didn't melt that fast, because that was a place where you could lose your business if you didn't sell your ice quick enough. And then they brought it out from Ashland and put that in there for Scobe, and Scobe would go get that and take it around and peddle it, and then he'd keep count of your 25 cents or whatever it was, and then I think you paid 15 cents for it. And that's 15 cents a day, because 25 pounds would last us about all day. And then you had the ice for your ice water, and you kept it in there. You keep meat in your ice box and milk. That was after we kept it in the creek. But it was an interesting time. It was a time where you had to be clever yourself to make it, because if you didn't, things didn't fall your way by itself. They fell your way because you brought them your way, and that's the best way of learning, when you got to do it yourself.